Jonathan Harstick. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator and AmeriCorps member at Sudbury Valley Trustees, a regional land trust. I've partnered with the Bolton Conservation Commission to assist with their invasive species management plan for this service year. Today I'm here with Matt Morris, another AmeriCorps member and land stewardship coordinator at Sudbury Valley Trustees. Today we're going to be taking a walk around Bowers Springs to talk about invasive species, their consequences, and the best management practices to fight them.
And the habitat site. Very nice. So first is just that island down there.
The original 48.1 acre parcel was purchased by the town of Bolton as the first conservation area within the town. Later on, an additional property was purchased by the town of Harvard. Combined, they are now the Bowers Springs Conservation Area. The now 91 acres forms a large tract of land of open space that forms a wildlife corridor within the region. The property features 2 ponds and 3 agricultural fields. The previous owners, the Visokas family, built a driveway along here that now acts as a trail from here to the parking lot, which holds about 10 cars. Some of the unique characteristics of this site include beaver habitat, an extensive network of trails, and old fields habitat. This old fields habitat is rare in our region, and it's very important for conservation because it provides habitat for insects, small birds and rodents, as well as prey and food for larger birds and mammals. Yearly it is encroached upon by forest growth as well as invasive plants. We also have a high amount of traffic at this property and many dog walkers, which also contribute to this disturbance of the old field habitat. So that is why active management at this property is particularly important. We want to preserve this rare habitat for Bolton and the greater Massachusetts where it's in decline.
Invasive plants are those that are non-native and also harmful. So not all non-native plants are invasive. So if you're looking right here, there is a Norway maple, or there's a Norway spruce, and that is it's that tree with the droopy needles. So Norway spruce is a non-native tree that was brought over here and planted. However, it doesn't really spread beyond where it's planted. Many of the plants in your garden, if you have one, are non-native but non-invasive. But there are some non-native plants that don't stay put when you plant them. Plants like Oriental Bittersweet or Glossy Blackhorn, they'll spread from where they're originally planted and move into our natural areas, like this piece of conservation land. They'll establish themselves in these areas and take away space and resources from our native plants.
Here we can see one of the unique features of the property, the beaver habitat. There might currently not be any beavers within the hut, but it shows their past activity within this parcel of land.
These 2 stumps right here, they show evidence of beavers. It's how they're pointed, and they use these trees for food, their dams, and their lodges. Some of these trees that the Bolton Commission is trying to protect has these metal guards around them, and so they value these trees to not be taken by the beavers. And you can even see right here that the beavers have even started to take this one down, but the Commission protected it before.
So this is another example of the Bolton Conservation Commission's efforts to keep this habitat in good shape. You can see these metal grates around the tree, the bases of these trees, to try to protect them from beaver felling. our left and to our right, there are two man-made ponds that were previously made by the Vasokas family. You can see that this kind of evidence of active land management in changing the land, and then also the kind of more natural components that have worked their way into the landscape. Another interesting kind of tidbit about autumn olive that it actually is edible. You can make kind of like jams and like fruit leather and different things with the berries. And it also is a way kind of to take some of those berries out of the ecosystem and you're consuming them. But you should, if you do make them, you should take the seeds and properly kill the seeds by, you can microwave them or do something so that they compost and break down in a way that won't spread the invasives.
The berries of invasive plants have been observed to be less nutrient to our birds. Our native plants some have berries that are higher in fat that will let them go through the winter, but berries of invasive plants tend to be higher in sugar. It's been described that invasive berries are kind of like invasive berries are kind of like junk food for wildlife. Scientists have also observed that when some birds are nesting in invasive plants, their nests are actually less successful if they were nesting in native shrubs. There's one invasive plant, Japanese barberry, that's been observed to be ideal tick habitat. So that increases the questing season of our ticks, which brings higher risk of tick-borne diseases like Lyme. And so removing Japanese barberry from your yards and our natural areas can reduce the amount of ticks around us.
On my left, this is the old field habitat. It's a rare habitat to this region, and it's actually in decline in Massachusetts as well as Bolton. That's why it's particularly important to conserve this area. Even just the native forest regrowth is encroaching upon this land, as well as the invasives. So that's why we're particularly interested in active management, so that we can preserve this rare habitat to allow homes for nesting, ground nesting birds, as well as rodents and other larger birds and mammals.
Conservation scientists have researched that invasive plants are actually the #2 threat to biodiversity, only behind habitat loss. And so it's super important to get rid of invasive plants where we can. One way to remove invasive plants is just to pull them out by hand. So this right here is glossy buckthorn. The best way to pull invasive plants is to start from the base of the plant as low as you can, and then just slowly pull out and try to disturb the soil as minimally as possible, and get as much of the root as you can. And then once it's pulled out, you can pat down where it was to prevent other stuff from entering and growing there. And with many plants, once you pull them out, the roots are actually still alive. So it's important to put them where they can't just re-sprout into the ground. So if you're pulling out a small amount, leaving them inside trees, keep the roots off the ground, or if you're pulling them in a larger amount, having a designated pile that will then be removed, that will then be eventually bagged, dried, or burned to fully get rid of these plants. This right here is one more invasive. This is glossy buckthorn. As you can tell that this is a glossy buckthorn, one moved by the leaf. So one that is around the edges, it's smooth, whereas some leaves have like teeth or they're serrated. one more thing is that the veins that travel towards the end, they go out and they move towards it, the edge. And if you move on to the leaf to the bark, you see that if you're moving on to the bark, you can see that it has these small white speckles, and these are called lenticels. And on buckthorn, the spots can be kind of scattered and of varying sizes. It almost looks like as if a painter took with white paint, just kind of flicked the stem, and so there's these white dots of varying sizes that are spread out. Drive on. Yeah, this is pretty typical of where invasive plants grow. Invasive plants, they like disturbed open areas, and so obviously there is a lot of open sunlight. In general, when you're trying to identify plants, the first thing you should look at is the pattern of its branches, and so plants can either be oppositely arranged. So there's one branch here, and directly opposite of it is a second branch. Another arrangement is alternate, where one branch is here, but the next one may be a little bit lower or higher, and they're kind of in this alternating pattern. And so that is one of the ways to start looking at plants. So looking at this invasive, looking at this shrub, one thing to tell me that this is a honeysuckle is the opposite arrangement. So these branches, they're directly across from one another. Another thing that tells me that this is honeysuckle is kind of the light brown bark color, and lastly, just the fact that we still have green leaves here in December, and also these leaves, they're oppositely arranged. There's these small red bumps. They're known as lenticels, and these ones in particular, they're very bumpy, and so if you don't have the leaves, this is one of the ways that you can tell that it is this plant. And so when tree having gets larger, you can tell it by its bark pattern. So here you can see these kind of waves that travel up the trunk. It almost kind of is in this diamond pattern. And so looking at the bark, the larger and thicker branches, kind of that like shaped pattern. All of those you can kind of piece together to see that this is tree of heaven, even when it doesn't have its leaves. The bittersweet berries, they kind of have these yellowy orange capsules, and this one still has some of it around some of the berries. Growing up here are the berries of Oriental Bittersweet, one of our invasives, and this is what I was talking about before, where these berries are widely available for wildlife. Many of them have less nutritional value for these wildlife. they tend to be higher in sugar than fats. So it's more of like junk food for wildlife and not as helpful for them lasting through winter. We're currently standing around some of the fields of this conservation land. And as Jonathan was mentioning, this type of habitat is in decline. One of those threats is from the encroaching invasive species from the forest edges. Invasive species, they like this open, disturbed habitat, and this disturbance is needed to maintain these fields. Particularly, they grow, particularly plants like Oriental Bittersweet, they grow on these edges along the trees, climbing up, and often covering the sides of those trees next to the fields. And we can even see here in this old field, this is a heavily invaded area. We've noticed bittersweet here, Glossy Blackhorn, Tree of Heaven, honeysuckle, the list goes on. It's important to take note and recognize some of these invasive plants because they don't provide the same ecological benefit as our native plants, and they take away that space and they take away that resource and habitat in our conservation land.
This property is a great property for Bolton. It receives a lot of it's a high traffic area with lots of visitors and their dogs, and we love to see those people here with their dogs. But we would like to emphasize that we do have this rare habitat here and some very important ecosystems. So it is important to keep your dog under control, whether that is a leash, verbal control. We like to just see that this is a welcoming and friendly area for all people, because open space is not only, as Matt said, for nature, but it is for people. So keeping your pets under control is very important, and it benefits everyone overall to have a more enjoyable experience at our parks. So we'd like to thank you all for joining us on this virtual walk today. We're really happy to have this tour of this property and showcase some of the management techniques that we're using here and preserving this habitat for people and for the natural environment. We're really thankful to be able to collaborate with the Bolton Conservation Commission and assist in these efforts to really make people more aware of invasive species and the implications that they have on our landscapes. I'm really excited to be working with Rebecca Longwall, and I look forward to the collaborations that we have moving forward. If you are looking for more information on invasive species and different resources, you can find them on the Conservation Commission website's webpage on the Town of Bolton's website. Again, we want to thank you, and we at Sudbury Valley Trustees are really looking forward to collaborating with Bolton. I'd like to thank Matt Morris for coming out with me as well and sharing all his valuable insights on invasive species.
Thank you, Jonathan.